"Daddy, look! Mommy!" the little girl screamed, pointing at the homeless woman with wide, innocent eyes. And that's when the millionaire collapsed to his knees. It started on a crisp autumn morning in the city park. A well-dressed man strolled hand in hand with his daughter, soaking in the sun, until her tiny voice shattered his world. Across the path, a homeless black woman sat on a bench, clutching a blanket, and she looked exactly like the wife he'd buried 3 years ago. But this was no coincidence. Before we uncover this incredible true story, we invite you to subscribe to True Hope Stories. Here, we believe in second chances, lost miracles, and the unseen battles of everyday people. Your support helps us bring powerful, emotional stories to life. Stories that heal, inspire, and remind us we're never truly alone. Ethan Caldwell was a man who had tasted the bitter edge of loss and clawed his way back from the depths. Once just another hopeful young husband navigating life with love and laughter, he had been shattered 3 years ago when a car crash robbed him of his world. Tamara, his wife, had been everything: his compass, his calm, the soft voice that brought light to his chaotic days. And in one blinding moment, she was gone. He had only stepped out for a meeting. Just one. The call came minutes after he arrived. A semi had run a red light. Tamara's car had crumpled like paper. By the time he made it to the hospital, she was unrecognizable. He never got to say goodbye. The funeral was a blur. He remembered Lily clinging to his leg, asking why Mommy was sleeping in a box. Ethan held it together for her, only for her. He had no choice. A 2-year-old doesn't understand death, but she understands absence. He sang her lullabies alone. He kissed away tears with none of his own dried. And when she asked if Mommy could come back soon, Ethan simply held her tighter, praying she wouldn't ask again. In the years that followed, he channeled his grief into building something. Anything. His tech startup, once a side project, became an obsession. Sleepless nights coding turned into early investments, and those investments eventually birthed one of the fastest-growing companies in Silicon Valley. From ashes, he forged steel. But even in success, he never celebrated. What was there to toast when the person he built it all for would never see it? Every milestone was muted. Every smile came with a ghost's whisper. Still, he endured. Lily grew. She had Tamara's curls, her mischief. The way she giggled when she watched the clouds roll by. It was like watching a memory walk around in tiny shoes. Ethan couldn't bear to tell her everything just yet. He wanted her to live freely, without the weight of the past. For now, Mommy's in heaven was enough. And so, it was a perfectly ordinary Saturday morning when everything changed. The sky was brushed in soft golds and blues, the kind of day Tamara used to call picnic perfect. Ethan, for the first time in a long while, felt at peace. He held Lily's hand as they strolled through the park, her tiny fingers wrapped around his like an anchor. Birds chirped. A vendor called out offering hot pretzels. Lily laughed at a squirrel darting across the path. Life, somehow, felt almost normal. Then came the voice. So innocent. So devastating. "Daddy, look! Mommy!" Ethan turned instinctively. He expected to see another young mom, maybe a woman with a similar hairstyle or the same tone of voice. But when his eyes landed on the woman sitting on the bench, across the path, something primal inside him shifted. The world slowed. Air caught in his chest. There she was, or at least, someone who looked exactly like her. The woman sat hunched forward, cradling a threadbare blanket as if it held the last of her warmth. Her clothes were torn and layered. Too many jackets for the summer sun, dirt smudging the sleeves. Her hair, matted in places, still curled the way Tamara's did when left to dry on its own. Her face, though worn by hardship, was achingly familiar. It wasn't just the shape of her eyes, it was the way they searched the horizon. Like she was waiting, For something. Or someone. Ethan stumbled. The ground tilted beneath him. His legs refused to hold him up. Memories erupted in a flood. Her wedding smile, the way she danced barefoot in the kitchen, the final moment at the hospital, his hand trembling as he signed the death certificate. This couldn't be real. Tamara was gone. He'd buried her. But this woman, this ghost, she looked just like her. People rushed to help as he collapsed. A passerby offered water. Lily's face was pale with confusion, asking what was wrong. Ethan couldn't answer. He couldn't speak. All he could do was stare across the park. But the woman was gone. In the few chaotic moments when people gathered around him, she had disappeared, melted into the crowd like smoke. One moment there, the next, a memory. Again. Back home, Ethan tried to convince himself it was grief playing tricks. His mind conjuring images where none existed. Trauma had a cruel way of haunting you, but something deep inside refused to let go. It wasn't just a resemblance. It wasn't just a momentary hallucination. He had felt it. That undeniable pull in his gut. The way Lily called out to her. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. He stayed up late that night, digging through old photos, comparing them side by side with every memory burned into his brain. He began to obsess. What if the funeral had been a mistake? What if there was a mix-up? Could someone have survived, only to vanish into the cracks of the system? Ethan became a man possessed. The next morning, and every morning after that, he returned to the park. He walked the perimeter, sat on the same bench, bought coffee for strangers in hopes they'd sit and talk. He combed the area with photos of Tamara, asking if anyone had seen a woman like her. Most people shook their heads. A few offered vague answers. Might have seen her last week. She keeps to herself. Don't talk much. But nothing. Solid. Days turned into weeks. The woman never appeared again. But Ethan refused to give up. He started venturing further, visiting nearby shelters, soup kitchens, underpasses. At night, he dreamed of her. Tamara calling his name from alleys, standing in shadows, reaching for him through fog. He woke up drenched in sweat, heart racing, her scent still lingering like it had never left. Then, one afternoon, a man approached him. He was older, face worn like leather, his eyes holding a wisdom born from years on the streets. He introduced himself as Royce. "You're the guy looking for the angel," he said. Ethan nodded, barely able to speak. Royce dug into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled wrapper, using it to draw a rough map on the back. "Try the old church on 12th and Willow. She goes there sometimes, real quiet-like. But she hums. Sweetest sound you ever heard." Ethan didn't hesitate. He drove through the city like a man on fire. As he pulled up to the crumbling church, the sky had turned gray, casting long shadows across the pavement. The air felt charged. He stepped. Inside, the creak of the wooden doors echoing like a heartbeat. Dust floated in beams of light. And then, from somewhere deep inside, he heard it. A voice, faint, humming a lullaby. It was the same one Tamara used to sing to Lily every night. The one she made up just for her. No one else would know it. He followed the sound, each step heavier than the last. And when he turned the corner into the sanctuary, there she was, sitting near the altar, rocking slightly, lost in the melody. She turned slowly, sensing him. Their eyes met. Time stopped. "Ethan," she whispered. And just like that, the past and present collided. Paramedics came swiftly, attending to Ethan as he lay collapsed on the pavement, his mind spinning in disbelief and his heart pounding with something he couldn't name, grief, hope, or madness. People crowded around, and amid the chaos, one noticed the woman slip away. By the time Ethan could sit up and look again, she was gone. vanished, as if she had never been there. But he had seen her. Lily had seen her. That wasn't just a stranger. That was Tamara, or someone who looked exactly like her. In the hours that followed, Ethan tried to convince himself it was a cruel trick of the mind. Grief could do that. He'd heard. Trauma had a long tail, and sometimes, when you least expected it, it whipped around and reminded you it hadn't let go. But this felt different, real, tangible, and no matter how many times he tried to rationalize it, something deep in his gut kept clawing its way back up, whispering the same impossible thing. She's alive. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room long after Lily had gone to bed, staring at an old photo of Tamara, her smile frozen in time. He flipped through albums, digital and physical, comparing the features, the eyes, the curve of her jaw. Every detail matched. The woman on the bench hadn't just resembled Tamara. She was her. Or she was someone who knew her deeply. That thought alone was enough to send Ethan spiraling into obsession. The next morning, and every morning after that, Ethan returned to the park. At first, he wandered aimlessly, scanning every face with desperate eyes. Then he got more focused. He brought printed photographs of Tamara, showing them to street vendors, joggers, and anyone who might have seen the woman. Most shook their heads. Some looked at him with pity, a few dismissed him outright, but a handful nodded slowly, uncertainly. Yeah, maybe I seen her. Keeps to herself, doesn't talk. He started bringing meals and supplies to the homeless community that had quietly made the park their home. A few recognized him after a while, nodding politely when he passed. He asked the same question again and again. Have you seen this woman? Over and over, he got the same blank stares or vague answers. Weeks passed, the days blurred. He neglected meetings, ignored calls, and let his assistant handle the business he had once lived and breathed. Nothing mattered now except the question he couldn't silence. What if it was her? One afternoon, just as he was about to leave, an older man sitting under a tree called out to him. Hey, he said, his voice gravelly but calm. You the guy looking for the ghost? Ethan froze. What did you say? The man motioned for him to come closer. He introduced himself as Royce, a retired Marine who had been living on the Tao streets for a few years. His eyes were sharp, and there was something measured in his tone, like someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. You showing that photo around? I seen her. I know who you mean. Ethan's chest tightened. You do? Yeah, Royce nodded. We call her Mari. Sweet lady. Doesn't talk much. Got scars, real deep ones. Not just outside, if you catch my drift. Keeps to herself mostly. But sometimes she hums. A soft tune, like she's somewhere else entirely. Ethan swallowed hard. Where can I find her? Royce looked up toward the sky, then pointed off toward the edge of the city. Try the old church on 12th and Willow. Abandoned place, but she goes there sometimes. Late in the evening, when nobody's watching, that's her place. Without waiting, Ethan thanked him and rushed back to his car. The drive felt endless. His hands gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline, his mind running wild with possibilities. It couldn't be her. But if it was, if somehow, by some miracle, it meant everything he thought he knew about that night was a lie. The church came into view as the sun dipped below the horizon. Its once majestic spire leaned slightly to one side, weathered by time and neglect. Ivy climbed its walls, and shattered stained glass windows looked out like tired, blind eyes. Ethan stepped out of his car, heart pounding in his chest. He walked toward the entrance, the wooden door groaning as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Pews were broken, scattered in disarray, and long-forgotten hymnals lay on the floor. But then, faintly, from the front of the sanctuary, he heard it, soft, almost ghostly. A hum. A lullaby. One he knew too well. It was the one Tamara used to sing to Lily each night. A tune they had created together, with words only they understood. No one else would know it. No one. Ethan stepped closer, slowly, afraid to break the moment. And then he saw her, silhouetted in the fading light filtering through a cracked window. Her back was to him, her shoulders wrapped in a patchy blanket. She swayed slightly, lost in the music. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. She turned, and when her eyes met his, everything stopped. She turned toward the sound of his footsteps, slow and hesitant, like a person waking from a dream they weren't ready to leave. Her face came into view, half lit by the fractured sunlight leaking through the stained glass. For a moment, the world stopped moving. The wind outside silenced, time froze, and Ethan's entire being narrowed to that one moment. Her face, her eyes, the sound of her breath catching as recognition flickered across her features. "Ethan?" she whispered, voice cracked and barely audible, as if she was afraid saying his name too loudly might shatter the illusion. It was her, not a look-alike, not a phantom conjured by grief. It was Tamara. Thinner, yes. Her cheekbones sharper, her skin a bit more worn. She bore bruises, faded scars, and a certain fragility that hadn't been there before. But it was unmistakably her, his wife. The woman he had buried in memory and mourned in silence for 3 agonizing years. She stood trembling, as if she too was unsure if this moment was real. Ethan couldn't speak. His knees gave out, but not from shock this time, from gratitude, from a soul that had carried weight for too long, now suddenly light. He collapsed to the dusty floor of the old church, tears welling in his eyes. "Tamara," he breathed, the name crumbling out of him like a prayer long withheld. She rushed to him, her legs unsteady, and when they collided, arms wrapped tight. Around each other, the years of pain, confusion, and emptiness poured out in sobs. She cried into his shoulder, her body shaking as she whispered apology after apology, her words broken by guilt and disbelief. "I didn't know. I didn't remember," she said, again and again, clinging to him as if she feared he'd disappear. In halting, trembling words, she told him everything. After the crash, she had been flung from the vehicle, her ID lost, her face unrecognizable beneath bruises and blood. The EMTs found no identification. She was rushed to a hospital hours away, misdiagnosed, listed as Jane Doe. A coma claimed her for weeks. When she finally woke, she was disoriented, confused. The world around her was unfamiliar. No memory of her name. No sense of where or who she was. She was transferred between care facilities, forgotten by the system. No family ever came because no one knew she had survived. Ethan had been told she died. The body in the car, burned beyond recognition, was identified with error. By the time Tamara began to stir from the fog of amnesia, she had already been filed away, invisible. She wandered. Hospitals discharged her once they deemed her stable. She drifted through shelters, halfway homes, streets. Then the dreams began. Fleeting images, soft laughter, a little girl's voice, the smell of coffee and cinnamon, a man's warm hand closing over hers. The memories came in flashes, never full enough to grasp, always vanishing when she tried to hold on. Then one day she passed a park. Her feet stopped, her chest tightened. She didn't know why, but something made her sit there day after day, like her soul remembered what her mind couldn't. She felt safe watching families walk by. Sometimes she'd cry and not know why. The sound of a child laughing would make her heart ache. And every night, in her sleep, she'd hum a lullaby without knowing where it came from. That's what Ethan had heard when he found her, the echo of a life she had lost, calling her home. When she finished, they sat together in silence, holding each other. Words weren't needed anymore. She was here, alive. Somehow, fate had rewritten tragedy into reunion. A soft voice broke the stillness behind them. "Mommy?" Ethan turned, and there was Lily, standing at the doorway of the church, wide-eyed and trembling. She had followed him that night, unable to sleep, too afraid he would disappear again like he had so many nights recently. When she saw her father collapse in the church, she waited by the door until curiosity and something deeper pulled her in. Tamara looked up, her breath catching. Slowly, she stood. Her hands shook. "Lily?" she whispered, the name unfamiliar. On her tongue, and yet more sacred than anything she'd ever said. The little girl ran, arms stretched wide, tears already falling. "Mommy." This time, Tamara didn't hesitate. She caught her daughter mid-run, lifting her into her arms, the eye blanket falling away. She kissed her hair, her cheeks, her fingers, as if trying to make up for every moment lost. Her tears soaked into Lily's curls as she whispered over and over, "Yes, baby. It's me." In that crumbling church, beneath the broken light, surrounded by dust and decay, a family was made whole again. The miracle wasn't just in the impossible return of a lost life. It was in the healing, the forgiveness, and the raw, aching love that survived everything. Some stories sound like miracles, and because they are.